Hey guys, Daniel with DCF Garage, and if you're new to the channel, this is me and my gorgeous wife's 2004 VTX 1800C. It's a beast. I love this bike, and I've got some critical maintenance to do on the bike. I've been postponing it for a while, and I'm actually going to do three things, and it's going to turn out in three separate videos, otherwise it would just be too long. The first one I'm going to do is a DESMOG of the bike. So I'm going to remove the pair valve and all of the smog related components from this bike because I'm getting a lot of popping in deceleration. I've checked the fuel pressure regulator. It's not that. I might have a leak in my exhaust. I'm also going to fix that. But since I'm going to take the tank off, I'm going to do a DESMOG. I'm going to replace the coolant. So this coolant has been there probably for 5 years. I've had the bike for 3 and I have not changed it, and I know it's green, and Honda revised the coolant and changed the color I think in 2016 or 17. You guys may correct me if I'm wrong. And what else I'm going to do? Oh yes, and I'm going to adjust the valves. I was riding it the other day and I noticed a slight ticking noise from the valves. So best case scenario, I just measure the gaps and they're all fine. If not, I'll do the adjustment on the valves. I'll measure the gaps. We'll go through that. So it's going to be 3 videos. The first one, DESMOG, coolant, and valve adjustment. Maybe not necessarily in that order. Now let's look at what I got parts wise. So I got some dielectric grease. I've got an exhaust gasket because I think when I removed the tip of my exhaust and sent it to modify it, I might have lost the gasket or it never had the gasket. The lack of the gasket caused me to over tighten the exhaust clamp. So I'm also going to replace the exhaust clamp. This is Honda original vacuum hose, because when I was checking to see, what could be causing the decel popping, I checked the fuel pressure regulator and I noticed that the hose was brittle at the tip. So I'm going to replace that hose. Maybe I'll even need more hose. We'll see. This is the tappet adjuster for the valve. You don't have to have the tappet adjustment for adjusting the valves. You can do this with an offset 10mm like this one. But for what I saw and what I read, it's going to be 100% easier if I do this with this tool. This is the feeler gauge that goes from 005 to 0020. I should be able to measure the gap for both my intake valves and my exhaust valves. We'll see. These are a couple of block-off plates for when I remove the pair system, the reed valve and the pair valve. I'm going to need to block it off. So this is what this is for. I got original Honda coolant, the blue coolant. It's already blended 50-50, and I got distilled water because once I drain it, I'm going to run some distilled water through the system and clean it nicely before I put the new coolant in. One thing I forgot to mention is that you're also going to need a high temperature RTV silicone for the block off plates. So we're going to have to put some silicone here. And you're also going to need a vacuum line cap. You're going to need to block something in the engine, and we're going to go through that real soon. And that's it. And one last thing, I just wanted to give the credit to bareasschoppers.com, and you can see there's a step-by-step you can take. So I want to give a shout out to these guys. Make sure you go to their page and you check it out because they have a lot more stuff there and they deserve all the credit. Well, that's it. Let's start getting the gas tank off. So first thing we need to do is get the seat out and the bags and all of this out of the way. And so let's do that. To get the seat out, it's just a 10mm bolt you loosen, and you got a couple of Allen bolts in there under the front seat, and they are 6mm. I'm gonna get the seat out. Now to remove the tank, we got 2 10mm bolts on each side. We're going to need 2 10mm wrenches. To loosen the tank, pull this bolt out, and then we're going to pull the tank backwards, and we're going to have to disconnect some fuel hoses. And before you pull out the gas tank, make sure that it's empty. You don't want to be pulling out the gas tank with 5 gallons of gas. That's going to be very heavy. It's going to make a lot of mess. So I rode my bike till it was near empty, and so hopefully I'm not going to make such a big mess. One more thing before you pull out the tank, you're going to have to remove the top part of the gas tank with the cluster. And one thing you also want to do is run a bungee cord through your front wheel just to stabilize it, so as you're messing with the tank you don't bang the handlebar on your head or on the tank. I finally figured out what the tank prop is for. It's for holding the tank so you have both hands free and you can work to disconnect the hoses properly. So I built it. Let's see if it works. So let me show you what I've done so far. This is the tank prop. It took me a few tries, but basically you just take a PVC pipe, drill a hole at the bottom, and make a U-shape cut at the top, and it's going to hold the tank nicely so you can reach with both hands into the fuel pump here. So I've disconnected the return line and I pushed it back. I just wiggled the line and was able to push it back. Disconnected the fuel injection connection here. You just press this tab down here and you just pull it out, no big deal. And then on the, what else? On the other side, I took a 17mm wrench here and I unscrewed the main line. What you have to be careful here is because there are two crush washers that you're going to need to put this back together. Just make sure you don't lose them. And I also disconnected this breather tube here from the tank. Now the tank is ready to be pulled out. In order to get this done, we're also going to have to remove the airbox. So I'm going to take care of this. These are 5mm bolts. I'm just going to loosen them. Four screws. This one. All right. So we got this hose here to disconnect. So I'm just gonna twist it, if you can see it. So I'm just gonna twist it a little bit. So next thing that we have to do here is to disassemble the snorkel and the flapper. What is it called? The flapper assembly on the left, on the snorkel on the right. Since we're going to remove the pair system, this is the secondary air system. It's got no use anymore. So we're going to remove it. I'm following the instructions, as you can see. So let's get to it. I'm going to need both hands. I'll be right back. So that gave me a little bit of work to get the snorkel out. It's shoved way in there. It's a little bit of trouble, but you'll get it. And so this is how your airbox should look like per the instructions. All right, and by the way, the flapper, I think this is like a check valve, and I don't think it's working right anymore. I can feel that it's not holding the vacuum properly. I see that. I think it's just too old. Probably the rubber is brittle. Now we're going to have to plug the pair inlet in the airbox. So I'm just going to take this plug that came with the blocker plates. I'm going to put some RTV silicone. This is the same high temperature RTV silicone that came that I got actually for the plates. And so I'm just going to slide this in and put something heavy on top until it dries. Now we need to disconnect the vacuum hose from the secondary air system. And after we pull out the hose, we're going to block this entrance here with the 1/8 vacuum plug. Now we need to remove the secondary air system solenoid and the vacuum canister which goes underneath. It's an 8mm. I just used a ratchet with an 8mm socket.
and we're just gonna pull it out. This is the canister. We're also gonna pull this out. This is the canister, and now we're gonna remove the plug for the SAS solenoid. Now let's get it out of the way. We're not gonna need this anymore. Look at it, it's just junk. Now get some dielectric grease, spread it in the SAS plug, and make sure you block it with electrical tape. Just use enough tape so no dirt, no water gets in the plug. And once you got it well blocked off, just get a zip tie and zip tie it to the main wiring harness. So as you can see here. Alright, so now I'm just going to cut off the access zip tie. That looks good. Now I'm going to remove the rear coil so we can access the rear cylinder reed valve. We're going to have to remove both reed valves from the rear cylinder and from the front cylinder. Getting the coil out of the way makes your life just a lot easier. Make sure you don't lose the bolts you've taken out. I found it also to be easier if I just disconnect the coil. Just make sure you disconnect it gently so you don't yank or damage the wire. Just get the rubber out of the reed valve. Well, we're going to get rid of this rubber hose anyway. Now let's start getting all the rest of the stuff out. Just follow the hoses that come out of the pair valve and disconnect them, because we're going to have to get all of that out of the way. We're going to remove anything that is connected to the pair valve, which is this metallic valve here I'm dangling. And this is a 10mm nut or bolt that holds the pair valve in place. You just take that out and disconnect everything. And this hose goes to the front reed valve that we're also going to remove the hose, and we're going to unscrew the reed valve to get it out and come in with the blocker plates. So follow the wire that comes out of the pair valve on the other side, and you're going to find this plug that you also need to disconnect. And this is another plug that we're going to block with dielectric grease and electrical tape, the same way we did to the other plug. Now that everything is disconnected from the pair valve, we're ready to pull it out. And here's the whole pair valve assembly that the bike doesn't need anymore. Now we have access to the reed valves on the front cylinder, or to the reed valve on the front cylinder, and we're going to remove the hose. We're going to unscrew the two bolts holding the reed valve on top of the cylinder. And this is a rare reed valve that we're going to remove also. So let's get the 8mm wrench. Just unscrew the two bolts. They're kind of snug. They're not too tight. So just come out with the bolts, remove the valves, and once we remove the valves, we're going to expose the gasket plate that's inside each cylinder. Now we're going to have to get that plate out. You'll see the plate, and the plate has three parts. We're going to have to grind down the bolts and separate the three parts because we're only going to use one, but you'll see that in a minute. Let me get these out. So this is the gasket plate. We need to take this out, and the front cylinder is going to have one that's exactly the same. So let's get these out and let me start working on them. So the gasket plates are held together by a rivet and by a screw. but you can't just unscrew because it's not going to come out. So you really have to grind down the back of both, so you can then use your screwdriver to remove the screw and separate the three parts of the plate and get just the top part, which is what we're going to use to put back in the cylinder, and then put our blocker plates. As you can see, once you remove the screw, everything just separates easily and nicely, and now we have just the top part that we're going to use. I'm just going to clean this off real nice, and then I'm going to go back in with the top part of the gasket plate and put the blocker plate in place with the RTV silicone. Now I'm going to start assembling everything back together. So I'm going to go back in with the gasket plate, just with the part that we separated, and we're going to put the blocker plate. So I'm just going to make sure it's in the right position. I'm going to get it out and put a bead of RTV. This is high temperature RTV silicone. Make sure it's a high temperature kind, so we can create a good seal in the cylinder. Now it's just a matter of tightening the bolts. I don't know the torque specs for these bolts, but these are very small bolts. They're 8 millimeters. So I just used a hand tight just to make it really snug. You kind of get a feel for this. You just don't need to over tighten these. Just keep that in mind. And that's basically it. The same applies to the front cylinder.
Alright folks, so these are all the parts that came out from the desmogging process. So we got here the snorkel, the flapper, the two valves that go on top of the cylinders, hoses, that's the secondary air system, and that's the pair valve. So all of this comes out, and the end result are the blocked off plates with the high temperature RTV silicone. You got all this free space now. I can adjust the valves now, and also let me get the flashlight. You can see the blocked off plate on the front cylinder too. So that's the end result. So I'm going to wrap this up for today, and what I did, I'm not going to assemble the airbox yet, but I've completed the DESMOG. As I showed you guys, I removed a bunch of stuff. The plates are, the block off plates are there. Everything is tightened. And now, before I put the airbox in, I'm gonna do the valve adjustment. And I'm also gonna do the ground fix, so stay tuned for that. And I'm also gonna do the coolant swap. So I still got ways to go with the bike. I'm letting the gasket maker just dry so I can tighten the exhaust, and that's it. But as far as the DESMOG goes, it's ready. If you guys like this video, and if you like this type of content, please give it a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe so you get a notification when the other videos come up. Thank you.